This is the cheapest Wrangler you can buy. 36 grand, steel wheels, doesn't even get collision warning standard. Above it sits 5 more levels, escalating all the way to a 1,000 horsepower Jeep priced like a house. But the Jeep that actually tops this list has less horsepower than half of them. What it has instead? A finish line 73 other race cars never reached. Start here, because this is the Wrangler you already have a picture of in your head. Base price, $36,035. A 285 horsepower V6, a 6-speed manual if you want to row your own gears, 17-inch steel wheels that are going to get curbed on a trail within the first month anyway. This Jeep doesn't even come with forward collision warning standard in 2026. No safety net, just a solid front and rear axle bolted to an honest steel frame, and it'll still climb terrain that would leave a $70,000 luxury SUV stuck and calling a tow truck. There's also a 270 horsepower Turbo 4 available, which beats the V6 on torque anyway, even though it loses on displacement. 4-wheel drive comes standard across the entire lineup. Not only the trim's worth bragging about, and even this base model can tow up to 5,000 pounds if you spec it right. Jeep still calls this America's best-selling open-air vehicle. Looking at this trim alone, it's easy to see why. Nothing else at this price point promises you can remove the doors and still legally drive to work. It wears the same trail-rated badge as every single Jeep on this list. Base model or not. Doors come off. Roof comes off. The windshield folds flat if you're feeling brave enough to try that on the highway. Most of these will never see a rock in their life. They'll spend their whole existence on school runs and grocery trips, and none of that changes what's bolted underneath them. Remember that frame. It's coming back. Same frame, but now Jeep flips the hardcore switch. Steel bumpers front and rear. Locking differentials front and rear. 33-inch tires, rock track 4-wheel drive, geared specifically for crawling over boulders at walking speed instead of cruising the interstate. All of it standard equipment, not an upgrade. There's a Willys trim that sits in between Sport and Rubicon with its own 33-inch mud terrain tires and a locking rear differential. It's aimed at buyers who want more bite without committing all the way to Rubicon money. People treat Rubicon itself like a trim bump. Nicer seats, a badge, call it a day. Underneath, it's a mechanically different truck, tuned for articulation instead of comfort, right down to red tow hooks up front. Apparently, even the color needed to signal how serious this trim is. But Jeep doesn't stop there. Order the Xtreme 35 package, and you get 35-inch tires, a factory-tuned suspension lift designed specifically to clear them, and a taller axle ratio to claw back the acceleration those bigger tires steal. Throw in beadlock-capable wheels, and that's hardware that used to mean a trip to an aftermarket shop and a voided warranty. Not anymore. Jeep effectively sells you a mild off-road race truck as a checkbox on a build sheet, financed straight from the dealership, warranty intact. This is where it stops being about tires and starts being about noise. A 6.4-liter Hemi V8, 470 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds in a vehicle shaped like a bread box with removable doors. It still rides on 35-inch tires and beadlock wheels, still runs the same low-range gearing built for trail work. None of the off-road hardware got sacrificed to make room for the engine. It even gets a 2-mode exhaust system, so you can toggle between quiet enough for your neighborhood and loud enough that your neighborhood knows exactly when you're leaving for work. Inside, heated Napa leather seats and a premium audio system round out a cabin that has nothing in common with the base sports cloth seats. Fuel economy lands around 14 miles per gallon combined, which nobody cross-shopping this Jeep is going to pretend to care about. The part that doesn't add up is the price. It's not more expensive than the V8 Wrangler it replaced. It's over $20,000 cheaper. The loudest Wrangler Jeep has ever built also happens to be the one more people can afford. Somebody at Stellantis decided that on purpose. They even turned it into a year-long event. This Jeep kicked off a 12 for 12 campaign, a new limited edition Wrangler dropping on the 12th of every month for an entire year. But there's a version of that same engine you can't just walk in and buy. Fox Factory takes it and, with the base package alone, matches the Moab's 470 horsepower. Add the optional supercharger, and it jumps to 705 horsepower. Same engine, same trick as bolting on a bigger fan, except this fan costs 11 grand. It rides on a 3.5-inch suspension lift with Fox's own internal bypass shocks, wrapped in 37-inch tires. The whole thing wears an olive drab paint job designed to look like it rolled straight out of 1941, right down to the cloth bimini top and tube doors. Fox Factory is the same outfit that turned a Ram 1500 into a 650 horsepower street truck earlier this same year. This isn't their first time turning a factory vehicle into something the factory would never sign off on alone. Only 250 of these exist total, and 249 of them aren't for sale to you at all. They're reserved specifically for active duty military and veterans. The one remaining unit goes to public auction for the USO. So if you're a civilian who wants one badly enough, your entire path to ownership is outbidding a charity auction against everyone else who also isn't allowed to simply order one. And this isn't even the first time Jeep almost handed the Wrangler this kind of factory muscle. We'll get to that. This is where the aftermarket stops asking permission. America's Most Wanted 4x4 drops a supercharged 426 cubic inch Hellephant V8 into a Wrangler, 1,000 horsepower, 950 pound-feet. A Trackhawk 8-speed does its best to keep the tires attached to the ground, backed by Dana 60 and Dana 80 axles, front and rear, so the drivetrain doesn't fold in half the first time somebody touches the throttle. The suspension gets 2.5-inch coilovers with 14 inches of travel, so this isn't merely an engine dropped into a stock chassis and hoping for the best. This sits at the very top of the company's own lineup too. Below it are 707 horsepower Hellcat swap builds, which by every normal standard should sound extreme, and instead sound like the starter package. Turnkey and fully built, the Hellephant version has sold for $235,000 to $270,000. That's Ferrari money. That's buy a house instead money. And after all of it, the badge on the hood still just says Jeep. But none of this is even new. Jeep already built one themselves back in 2016. A Wrangler with a 707 horsepower Hellcat engine and a manual transmission. It wasn't a rendering or a press release either. It was a real running Wrangler that showed up at Jeep's own Easter Jeep Safari event, wheeled around in front of actual crowds, and then rolled straight back into storage. Not one single unit was ever sold. Pure concept made to get everybody excited about a car they'd never get to buy, which means everything the aftermarket is doing right now with the Hellephant build, Jeep had the idea first. They just never followed through. Second, the Wrangler 4xe, the plug-in hybrid trim that paired a turbocharged 4-cylinder with a battery pack and electric motors. Discontinued for 2026 after several years on sale. It could run on electricity alone for a short stretch and still tow with the best of the gas trims. It never fully shook the sense that Jeep wasn't sure who exactly it was building it for. Proof that not every version of this badge survives. Some get built, sold for a few years, and disappear from the lineup without much of a goodbye. You'd expect the last one on this list to be the most extreme build yet. More horsepower, more boost, something with two engines bolted together. It's not. The last one is a Wrangler JKU, nicknamed the Terremoto, Italian for earthquake, and it didn't earn its spot by being the most powerful thing here. It earned it by finishing. In 2020, that Jeep became the first full-bodied street-legal four-door Wrangler to complete the 4400 Unlimited class at King of the Hammers, widely considered the toughest single-day off-road race on the planet. No limits on tires, no limits on horsepower, no limits on chassis design, which is exactly why almost nobody else in that race was driving anything you'd recognize as a production vehicle. Most of the other 73 cars in that field were race trucks engineered from scratch, worth more than most houses, engines, and suspensions that never touched a factory floor. The race itself is designed to break things on purpose. Over 200 miles of desert stitched together across 3 laps, threaded through more than 20 rock-crawling trails that have ended plenty of purpose-built cars before they ever saw a finish line. Tony Pellegrino built and drove the Terremoto specifically to test something. Could a street-legal 4-door Wrangler running parts any of us could order online survive 14 straight hours on terrain designed to break cars that exist for exactly one race a year and nothing else? It beat 73 of them, finished with 2.5 hours still on the clock. Built almost entirely from parts sourced off a shelf from a company called Gen-Right Off-Road. And remember that steel frame all the way back on the cheapest Wrangler on this whole list? That's the same frame this thing was still riding on. Every other car in that race had already thrown its production chassis away, replaced by a cage fabricated in a shop specifically for one weekend in the desert. This one didn't need to. So which one would you actually want in your driveway?